All right, we got so much time. I think I'm going to do that again. There we go. I think it was a lot more meaningful the second time around. Usually at this time, Rick would let everybody know who's here, who's listening and not utilizing video. And I'll step in for this task today. We have Colin McDougall and me.
Thank you. Thanks for giving us the introduction there.
So we're expecting more people to come on, and we do have some great guests for today. But a couple of technical difficulties and that kind of stuff. We'll see how it goes. But let's take a look at our great sponsors for a second. Talk about them for a moment. Every single one of those sponsors are special to us in one way or another. We're going to have Rick join us here. Hey, video. Is there some sound?
There is sound, yes.
Woohoo.
It actually worked. So we've already gone through the painstaking process of announcing everybody who's here. So for those who are using video can know who's here. And now we've been joined by Rick Thompson.
Did you hit those sponsors, Jamie?
I did, and I kind of wanted to, since we have a couple seconds, mention them again and how cool they are. Right now, the prevailing theme for a lot of us is seeing what's going on with this MCMA and huge investor kind of plot to take over the industry and reduce rights of other people. And
our sponsors are not those people.
Our sponsors are not those people. Every one of them has made that clear. The Detroit Nutrient Companies helped to kind of make some contacts with some of those people to get word to them that that's undesired. Botanical Company, of course, which supports what I do, and I'm pretty clear about the position I take on that. And we had Russ Chambers, the CEO, on here a couple of weeks ago. We have Redemption. Of course, that's Ryan Basor. Probably enough said, but suffice it to say that he is on our side. He's an activist. The Redemption Foundation has been a part of many great things already in its short life. 10% of proceeds from Redemption product purchases go to that foundation to do a lot of good work. We have Grow Green. We grew up with Grow Green, in this industry. And the caregivers are what they live on. We have Real Leaf Solutions. That's a caregiver that got into the licensed world and scaled up and produces great cannabis for a larger group of people than they did from when they were caregivers, but they still have that same philosophy and approach. So we really appreciate our sponsors. We have some others coming on in the near future. So I want to talk about last week for a second. That was really intense. That hit a chord with a lot of people. I heard a lot about it throughout the week.
Let's tell people what last week's show was, Jamie.
Sure. We touched on the true story of Rainbow Farm. And Rainbow Farm has a huge history in this movement in Michigan. It's known about by a lot of people, but it didn't get the type of attention that it really should have for how intense of a situation it was. Some people refer to it as Michigan's own little Waco and that type of stuff. Two activists who had maintained and facilitated cannabis activity, on property over a period of time with gatherings with music and fun and naked hippie slide and stuff like that we discussed. Were ultimately just rooted out. They were killed. We went over the story. I didn't know some of the subtle details. I was upset already at the fact that they gave a shit enough to bring in a military invasion over the activity. to kind of believe, I think, that their shooting was forced, that it was an overreach, that they very likely were not in a position where they just were taking a standoff. I believe the people who said that that they were very much so anticipating getting to be reunited with their son, and that they wouldn't have jeopardized that, and they weren't about this type of violence, and they weren't encouraged. And I believe the people who gave us testimony last week, and I've seen the state act in similar ways. So I'm fairly convinced that was an overreach, and those were unnecessary deaths.
Well, you're talking about Tom and Raleigh, but one of the people that we had last week was Boss Crosland, who was Tom's nephew, right? So you're talking about people that were actually there at the farm, and in our crowd, including Melody Carr, people who were actually at the location when the shooting took place. They were gathered as close as they could get, as close as the cops would let them. I mean, it's hard to dispute what those people saw that day. Wow.
I agree. So that was a good one. We are going to have those guys back on. We're going to talk a little bit more about the New World. There's still some stuff we didn't cover with the history, but we got right to like the intensity of it. But such a cool place. I kind of feel like you did, Rick, at the end of that story. You said, I feel like I've missed out, you know, and
Me too.
I kind of feel like the same way. So we got a lot of people checking us out here and getting in on the conversation. I did also want to touch on a little bit more about the MCMA type stuff and the attack on caregivers. There's another way, and we've discussed it on here before, that the caregivers are kind of being attacked. That is by local ordinances. There was a case, People versus DeRuyter, put into question, you know, how far local decision makers can prohibit cannabis activity from the MMA specifically. And the case had to do with some other stuff, but as is common, the envelope is being pushed. And a really good group of people, Jen Lindemann, Buddy Dalton, and many others have been kind of working in the city or the township of Flushing for a while, trying to help shape up what their ordinance will look like. And they have taken a very prohibitive approach to get started with. But good news is they've kept at it. They've organized rallies. They've understood the issues. They've shown up and explained what the problems are. And at the last meeting, there was success in tabling or scrapping the most current attempt at trying to be prohibitive.
They sent it back to the drawing board. And Jen Lindemann is also known as Jen Bronson, who is in our chat right now. So big ups to Jen and for all the work that she put forth.
And I put that up before, and that is her who I was discussing. She's come on the scene and has been very helpful, particularly on this issue. So that's much appreciated, and everybody who has helped out and been part of these discussions. And, you know, Rick showed up online for some early meetings and made a lot of sense to a lot of people. And
I was there on Thursday to testify in person too. Yep.
Yeah, there you go. And this is one of those times when we can look at that and I think say success.
And Jamie,
protected the caregivers for at least for now.
I know there was an Americans for Safe Access meeting that I was listening to a little bit, and Jen was part of that also. You know, when you see someone who truly has activism as part of their character and their personality, you can tell. You can tell. Just like Colin McDougall, you can tell. He's everywhere. He especially in the early days, he volunteered to do everything and followed through on his commitments, and because of that, he's grown into the integral part of the community that he is now today. So happy to see that, Jen. Continue,
well, thanks
please.
for saying that about me, Rick.
Truth.
Appreciate
you know I don't
it.
lie. I don't lie.
Can't say enough about Colin or the MCMA. Here's the,
so
We're
that's
just
apparently
talking about me.
so that's a male, and there's spider mites. So something happened. I don't think they did this to themselves. I don't think this was pure ignorance. People might want to say. I think somebody did this, but it is fucking funny.
Well, explain what this is. This is actually the screen that you see when you log onto the MCMA website. I know people in chat were talking about it. Someone has hacked their site apparently to place this rather embarrassing photo on their webpage. Someone in the I think Adam Baum says that they may have fixed that by now, but sort of comical. But this is what happens when you mess with people. People mess back, right?
So yeah, so this is like as bad as it gets. They just really went for it here, and then the stereotype of them not understanding anything that they're doing and bungling around and all that kind of stuff is just amplified. Male plant, it's got bugs.
Can't even grow the male plant right.
Wow. Astro Charlie, so gross.
I guess it is still up. So Sunshine says it's still up. So
is it? Oh no.
Very most likely is.
Yeah. Nope. Sunshine Daisy is Tanya. She was there as well. She brought her granddaughter and took her granddaughter up to the podium and said, "Look, this is what a cannabis patient looks like. This is who you're screwing over in your township when you do this." It's bold. It is bold when people take their child up to give testimony and hold their own family up as a proof statement. So kudos for that as well, Sunshine, Tanya.
Right on. Hey, Richard Clement stopping by. Of course, he works with Representative Cynthia Johnson on cannabis matters, and he's been doing a great job in that regard. And there's a lot of stuff going on. Oh, hey, we are blessed with the eyes of Krista Beller here with Real Leaf Solutions. She let us know that the deficiencies are abound. There's like a video if you go there. There's all these pics and stuff, and it is horrible. Somebody laid it on pretty thick.
The MCMA had been hacked, but again, when you hack people, they hack back. Just to be clear, nobody I know has anything to do with this, but I mean, I'm still going to chuckle when I find this happening. Yeah, and it's it is definitely not them. There is somebody up to no good here, but funny nonetheless. We'll celebrate it. So we are short panel today, and I beg your pardon. Well, I know it doesn't apply.
Saying that I'm short.
Well, I know he's
saying that fewer people co-hosting. I usually have fewer people. Nice group of people here to contribute, and it is less than typical. And we did talk a lot about last week, and we talked a lot about the current status of the different ways that caregivers are being attacked. And we have a great guest lined up, and he happens to be here already. And so I thought maybe we could get the show on the road as long as Mr. Bonsett is ready to join us.
How's it going, guys? I'm doing well, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll just get started if that's cool with you.
Yeah, let's get into it. Nice to meet you guys.
All right. I'm Jamie Lowell. We've got Colin McDougall and Rick Thompson here with us, and I know a little bit about you, but we'll give you an opportunity to kind of give us the background of how you end up in this space. You got a few years in on the industry, have experience and businesses in Colorado, had some time in Oregon. I'm not sure if there's still any activity there right now, but I know that there was some time spent in Oregon, and you have a lot of stuff going on in Michigan. You have a couple stores open right now, but there are plans for big cultivation, a couple more stores, and just to have a big presence here at large. Is that close?
That is really close, Jamie. Thank you. It was,
all right.
I'll give you my elevator speech on where I came from. I happen to be in the real estate market as a real estate professional here in Colorado when cannabis started to kind of sort of move towards recreational, and so I got in early. Dipped my toe early and didn't really get serious until about 2012, 2013, once recreational cannabis passed here in Colorado, and owned my first dispensary in a town called Carbondale, Colorado. quickly learned how to work with the municipalities to sort of issue the licenses and develop a good relationship with those municipalities from the sense of trying to make sure that we could work with them and they were places that made sense and was cannabis friendly. So that's kind of my first start here in Colorado, and then quickly kind of figured out that cultivating large cannabis was really where my heart lied. I always loved to grow weed, and so I opened a large. We developed a large scale facility in Colorado, in Denver, and it was a 45,000 square facility that we built out in like 2013, and that was really my liaison into larger scale cannabis business, and really kind of led me to NOBO. And really for us, it's all about cultivating the best weed we can at the lowest cost of goods sold. That's really kind of what our model is. And no, we are not in Oregon anymore. Oregon was a place where I definitely had to cut my teeth and learned a lot of lessons. Learned that you couldn't just put up cannabis facilities and think you're going to make money. That you need to have a longer strategy, and as far as being vertically integrated and things like that. So Michigan was coming online, and I had the ability to kind of start fresh in Michigan. I'm from Indiana originally, and so it was great to be able to come to Michigan and be an early person here into the space. And right now we've got retail locations in Eversburg and Muskegon. We've got one in Ben Harbor opening, as well as one in Battle Creek over the next 60 days. And we've got a couple others lined up that are in development. And we've got a 33,000 square foot cultivation site in Ben Harbor, and that's been an awesome project. We brought in our patented LED technology, and we also have an extraction lab there. So we literally just got adult use last week. So we've primarily been working in the medical market over the last 9 months. And that's, I have to clarify this. We're really mainly Michigan-based employees. So our company is really entrenched in Michigan, and we love it there. That's a little bit about me.
Right on. So I heard in there your patented lights.
Yes.
And, does that mean that you have a light company with patented lights?
We do. We have a company called Grow Ray Technologies, and NOBO's one of the largest owners of that particular business. And we got involved in that here in Boulder, Colorado, where I live, and where I'm from at this point, where our home is. From the NOBO perspective, as far as where we started, again, most of our employees are in Michigan because we do have operations here, but they're not as large as they are in Michigan. But our Grow Ray Technologies here, and came from a patent from the University of Georgia years ago that some scientists developed here in Boulder, and they gave it to me. And at that point, I was using HPS and gave it to my growers, and they were like, "Well, this light actually works." And then the rest was history. And now our facilities are all built with this light. And we've got several other large scale facilities in Michigan with the Grow Ray light as well. And we really just feel like we know that it outperforms HPS, but it also provides a much better product.
Wow. That's very cool. And saves a lot of energy costs, I assume. And
it does. You look at it like one of the things we learned early on in Colorado when we built our facility, we thought it was all about, okay, we just need as many plants under canopy as we can. We didn't really worry about, we didn't think about thermal management and pest mitigation and all these things that we have to deal with now from a testing perspective. And so we quickly learned that the HPS was really an environmental terrorist, I like to call it, right? it just, you're burning this very hot lamp, and now you got to bring in all this HVAC to cool it. And it's a difficult process. You're always fighting the HVAC. There's never a good, really good options for HVAC. And, just typically our light and a lot of lights that have kind of knocked ours off as well as some of our, competitors are really say 700 amps coming out of the wall versus 1180 with a 1,000-watt HPS. And so we feel like, states like Massachusetts, California are already starting to mandate it. And we just decided to be early adopters of the technology, and it's working out.
Alan, one of the things we're seeing in California is that there are very strict energy restrictions, and environmental impact statements are required for all cultivation situations, whether indoor or outdoor. Now, I know that standard is very difficult to meet, but is that something that you'd like to see implemented in other states? I know you have a multi-state perspective.
Absolutely. That's a great question, Rick. We are implementing it here in Colorado. Our large-scale project that we're working on here in Colorado with our partners at Ceres. They're a greenhouse manufacturer here in Boulder, Colorado, where, without going too much detail, Rick, it's a sun chamber system that uses the sun and reclaims water and only uses our light as needed. And it's a sealed environment that is GMP, which, if you're familiar with GMP, that's really the standards that we feel like will take hold once federal legalization happens. And that's what we're looking at right now in Europe. So Europe already mandates GMP-rated facilities for cultivation. So what we have what we're building is a project that's going to have less of a carbon footprint than any other project we know, and that's one of our missions here in the cannabis business from the NOBO perspective.
We talk about. I'm sorry, Jamie.
No, I just
talk. Go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with his approach to want to be environmentally conscious. So I was just supporting that.
But the concept of making sure that there's, for example, a certain number of lumens always available for your plants to consume inside the greenhouse, and that there would be a detector that would only activate your lights if the natural ambient sunlight were deficient to produce that. That's pretty intense. That's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a adaptive light sensor that is analog, and the analog is fixture to fixture. So I can remember, being out in Carpentria, California, and I guess Rick, if that's where you're from, that area in California, we noticed that there was parts of these greenhouses that were shaded in aspects in certain parts of the day, and needed light, and the other parts of the greenhouse didn't. And so our next version is more of a digital fixture to control it from a central control system. But the analog system works really well. And what people don't know is when you keep the proper PPFD on the plant, it grows a more consistent product. So, and in Europe and places where testing is even stricter from the cannabinoid profile than it is here in the States, and at least in most states, that's critical.
Let's catch our audience up a little bit. You mentioned the term GMP a couple of times. GMP stands for Good Manufacturing Processes, and that's really a standard of procedures that's adopted by industry or by government and then imposed upon industry to make sure that everybody's doing things to a minimum standard. Isn't that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And a lot of it has to do with cross-contamination, right? We've seen so many companies buy cure boxes to cure their deficiencies in their cultivation site, for example. And what we look at it is like clean space, has to occur. Clean room space has to occur. Keep the pest out, like the art of war, right? Fortify your fort, right? Don't let the enemy inside. So that's really what GMP is all about, is making sure that pathogens and mites can't come in the facility, and you're growing a cleaner product. And that's the way we see the future going. And we feel like when you go in our stores, you'll see the difference in our product.
Right on. What does NOBO stand for?
NOBO. What does NOBO stand for? It stands for we have a bunch of things. Those who are in the know NOBO. No, I'm just teasing. That's one of our little cheesy taglines. NOBO actually stands for North Boulder County. That's where we started growing weed years ago, and there's a huge culture in North Boulder County up in the mountains here, where there were a lot of people actually from Michigan, for example, who moved up here like in the 60s and started growing cannabis at a high level. And that was my introduction to cannabis. And that's kind of where it came from.
That's cool. Very nice. So how does the laws in Michigan stack up to the other places that you do business in or have done business in?
You know, I like Michigan. Like in Colorado, the early on days, we had the enforcement division, and the biggest difference is that there were people who were growing cannabis illegally here in Colorado, and they were allowed to basically get licenses. And the regulatory board here kind of had to deal with a lot of that riffraff. So you're taking something that was illegal and you're turning it into a legal business, and you've got people who were breaking the law that you had to deal with on that. So it was set up more like policing, if you will, the industry, and it's changed here in Colorado since then. And I think as far as the enforcement division, Michigan really started out in that, as you guys know, basically saying, look, we're not going to allow black market growers to get in. If you have $1,000, you have a cash going in your account of $1,000, you got to explain that where it come from, right? And you also had to put a lot of money up to get that license. And so I like that because we're trying to make this space, not to weed out people that, no pun intended, that can't afford it, but like growing cannabis is a really difficult thing. And running a dispensary with 280E, with the 280E laws, make it tough to be profitable. And in this space, you really need to know what you're doing. And so Michigan, the state has been awesome to work with us. The MRA has been great. They're getting it right there in my perspective, especially considering looking at California and Oregon and even Washington for that amount. But I really think Michigan's doing a good job, is my opinion. It's
Alan,
not easy. What's that?
Kind of contradictory to the way that most of us believe, because we believe that those high entry fees that you just described as a positive for the industry are really a negative, and they keep people out of the industry that actually belong in here, people that actually help to build the industry, upon whose shoulders we all stand at this time. And you should probably know that Jamie and I both had different ones, but both had illegal dispensaries here in the state of Michigan before the medical program. We're kind of the riffraff you just mentioned.
Isn't it that gone though, Rick? I mean, isn't the amount of money that you're putting in there? It's gone. I mean, they're not looking. They've opened Michigan up further than they did before. And so when I say riffraff, I mean we're paying $60,000 for a license, right? And so if the state's going to protect, if the state's going to issue those licenses, they have to protect, the cultivator. And so, I too came as a caregiver and a lot of other people, but the point is that we're making this a legal business. And I don't know. I mean, didn't mean to offend you there, Rick.
Well,
Alan, go ahead, Rick.
Well, I mean, when we talk about making low barriers to entry, that's reducing some of the extreme costs that come in there. When we say having an inclusive industry, that means the people who were doing it for 10 years before we got the legalization laws. At one point, I know you're not from Michigan, but at one point we had 500 dispensaries in the state, all of them running in the gray market. 500. So it's quite an industry that existed prior to licensing. And
Sure.
People are really excluded by a couple of the things that made the industry strong.
Yeah, I think your point's taken, Alan. But as Rick points out, that this is kind of a sensitive issue for us here, particularly many of those who work very hard on achieving a lot of the things for individual rights and small businesses. And you may or may not be aware of this group called the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association, and they, along with other large investors, have been working to peel back individual rights and to make it more difficult for smaller businesses to operate. And in this climate right now, to be talking about the need for extra restrictions and to keep riffraff out is just a little sensitive, even though you probably don't intend to be, so inflammatory.
Yeah, I definitely didn't mean that inflammatory. Well, let's look at Illinois. Let's look at what happens when the government tries to step in and allow social equity applicants to be a part of a government mandated, regulated cannabis industry, and look what happened there. So it's always a double-edged sword. In Illinois, the people that deserve the license didn't really get them. You know what I mean? So it's a difficult, sensitive process. When by no means do I call you guys riffraff. We're all riffraff, right? I mean, come on, we're on podcast, smoking weed, hanging out, talking about cannabis, but it is a hot subject by now, by far, and with everybody, it's everybody's right to be able to grow cannabis, right? And I think that's the most awesome aspect of it. But you also have to think about what it takes to actually, get through testing and what the requirements are. And those requirements are very, very strict. And unless you've got the ability to get through, to be able to have the hardware to get through that, it could be a very difficult business.
Yeah, but who is the state to decide who gets a chance and who doesn't get a chance? Everybody should have an opportunity to. By saying that it's difficult to survive in that industry, so we need to limit the number of people in it. That's protectionist. That's not opening the door and involving a lot of people.
Do you feel like that's happening though, Rick? And do you feel like that's happening in Michigan right now after the laws have changed? I mean, in the sense of you still feel like it's very closed off? Because it feels to me like it's becoming more open, and from my perspective, and maybe I'm missing something.
It really isn't, though, when you talk about social equity applicants or people that have caregiver licenses. Social equity applicants, the number one barrier to them becoming successful is access to capital. It's not an inability to be able to competently run a business. It's not an inability to know how to properly cultivate cannabis. It's all about achieving Benjamins. So by keeping that barrier to entry high, we're preventing people who really deserve an opportunity to get into this industry from getting into this industry. And it's also the number one reason why social equity isn't more successful here in Michigan, and why it's not more successful in Illinois. And oftentimes the people that are lobbying in order to keep those barriers to entry high are people like yourself, Alan, who actually say things like you just said earlier. I'm not trying to be offensive, but when you say things like it's good that we don't let everybody into the industry, that's kind of backwards.
I think it's wrong, Rick, and I think maybe because you're kind of talking to the wrong person about that. I mean, if you're looking at NOBO and who we are, I get you. I understand you got somebody you got a beef out there with, but you're taking it up with the wrong person here. We are in Benton Harbor, knee deep in social equity. We are in an opportunity zone, one of the few cannabis providers that I know in an opportunity zone. So what I would say is, NOBO does a lot to give back to the community. We're very well known for doing that in the communities that we're in. So I would stand corrected on, putting me in the category of the man. I'm not, we're not a publicly traded company, and we're not that big. We worked really hard to get in the position that we're in. Through hard work and doing right by the community, and that's what we'll keep doing.
Right.
I can't solve the problems of all the incarcerations and everything that's occurred in cannabis over the years. It's what I'm trying to do is just make a better product at a lower price, and we offer ISOs in our company, so we really do our own thing here, and so I feel like. You might be biting the messenger here.
Yeah. So, Alan, let's ask you directly. Do you support, oppose, or neutral on opening up the law and peeling back existing rights for caregivers, or making more obstructions or burdens on their activities, and making it more difficult for smaller businesses to flourish?
So I am definitely, I'm all about ownership and love the country we live in, because you can go and open an LLC for $70. So I'm always all about small business and allowing that small business to prosper, and everybody gets a shot. So there's no question on that. We look at it as we're going to compete with anyone, and that's what we have to do in this space is compete. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of a capitalistic society. But no, I think that everybody deserves an opportunity. And that's part of why we build our company the way it is. That's why we offer employee stock options. Employees who do not have the ability to go and start a large cultivation site can come to NOBO and be a part of our team and be compensated when the overall company, if we succeed. There's no, just because we have a couple dispensaries and a large grow, that doesn't mean that we won. You know what I mean? We've got a lot of work to do every day to establish our brand and to try to keep the bills paid. And I'll tell you what I don't like is the weed tax that we get everywhere we go. And that's not going to change whether or not it's a little guy or a big guy. And so I think that, that's an issue that our industry needs to address. Just the cost of capital for everybody, the cost of services that have gone up, the cost of goods that are higher for cannabis people. Those are, there's a lot of, the amount of taxes we pay. These are all things that make our lives much harder in the cannabis industry.
So that's cool. And I hear the effort on social equity, the effort on making a great place to work, to support your people, to be a good competitive company, to look for things within the system that could make for better efficiency and less costs and that type of thing. But the reason that the MCMA wants to peel back on rights of caregivers and create more burdens and make it more difficult for small businesses to flourish is because they believe that by doing that, it'll help out their own businesses.
Sure.
So, I mean, when it comes down to that, when and if, and we expect some action on this in the fall, we might be able to defeat it, and we're going to try to. Are you in support of that? Are you against that? Or do you think you're going to stand aside?
I mean, I'm in support of it. And why not? Right. I think the issue that you're going to come to is, caregiver product was able to be sold inside the market, and you're going to come into a question of testing and facilities. So there's two parts of it. Is the facilities that are built from a caregiver perspective, are they safe? And if you're building a safe facility, then I'm all about it. But it's safety first. The product has to have, it has to be clean product.
So you're talking about if the caregivers were able to bring product into the commercial market? That's not on the table. Yes, I agree that if caregivers, and I agree that they should, were able to resume bringing product to market, they'd have to meet the standards that are in place, and that kind of stuff. But what the MCMA wants to do is simply make it more difficult for caregivers to operate at all, period, out of fear that their activity cuts into their bottom line. And I don't know if you can still hear me or not, but
I can't. Sorry about that.
We're all doing that. We're all doing it, Alan. No problem.
Right. We're working against that. We're working against any changes that create more restrictions or more burdens for anybody else. And so that's really what we're trying to, I'm asking you, if you'll support that perspective where we don't create more difficulties for anybody else and worry about, as you described earlier, creating a great product, offering it at a fair price with really good service, and having that be your focus.
Yeah, it's so tough, because it's you go to, or you guys asked me about Oregon, right? Because I think the reason I'm bringing up Oregon is that, Oregon was the exact opposite in kind of what you guys were talking about. And so I don't know the answer, guys. This is just a conversation. So but I'm just trying to go down this road with you guys. But in Oregon, they gave licenses to everyone that they possibly could. And everybody wanted to be a grower there. And what I saw there was a lot of really sad people. Well, honestly, broken people that had their dreams taken away because they got their license and they thought they were just going to grow cannabis and make a bunch of money, and they didn't. And so that was a real issue. So it's just it's a difficult process. But in the end, what I would say with NOBO is we always believed years ago, when we got in this space, we realized here in Colorado that it was going to be competitive, and that if we wanted to be in this space, we had to compete. And so, but yes, I will support it, Rick.
I beg your pardon?
I mean, yes, I will absolutely support what you're talking about. I mean, I think people, we don't want this more regulated than it already is. It's very, very regulated right now.
The two proposals that give us most pause that are on the table would be, one, to reduce the number of plants allowed per caregiver and reduce the number of plants allowed per patient, which that's significantly a problem for us, since at that point patients would have fewer plants than non-patients, and that doesn't make any sense. You get where I'm saying, right, Alan?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. So that's
and there's no reason.
And the other thing is to require testing of caregiver cannabis before it's distributed to their patient. Now, there's never been an issue with caregiver cannabis in Michigan. There's no history of illnesses. We have thousands and thousands of transactions happening every day, every week, and there are no illnesses. Nobody's getting hurt. There's no demonstrable need for there to be testing, but it's viewed that requiring testing between the patient and caregiver would then stifle the caregiver market, and in effect, perhaps drive patients into regular retail markets in order to purchase their cannabis. But there's really no reason for that. So I guess what we're looking for is your opinion about forcing caregivers to test cannabis before they deliver it to their patient.
I'm sorry, Rick, I missed your last question there.
Well, forcing caregivers to test cannabis before it's delivered to a patient. Certainly, there's a need to test cannabis in the commercial market, but small batch homegrown cannabis being delivered from caregiver directly to patient with no intermediary, you think we should be testing that?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if the patient is comfortable with where they're getting their product from, and each individual has the right to grow so many plants, I would say no. Right. But I would say that also a consumer has the right to know that if they're going into a legal provisional, that they're buying cannabis that is tested, that they feel comfortable about.
Right, and they can't speak to everybody who produced that medicine and look at the process and
right.
So they need that kind of standard in place for that type of a purchase.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's no fun, guys. Testing is you want to talk about things that aren't fair. We could talk about testing for a while. Testing isn't really a perfect science either, but it's difficult. Just this space. Guys, I've been in this a decade, and I've had I don't know. I think I'm on my 11th to 13th cannabis business, basically. Anywhere from extraction to large cultivation sites to you name it, I've done it, and very difficult. And like I said, you brought up Oregon. Man, there were a lot of broken dreams in Oregon, and so, but everybody deserves to chase their dream, and if their dream is to grow cannabis, they should be able to do so. And I love it because I have people coming to me that are friends of mine, and they have children that are no longer children, that are in college, that want to get into the cannabis industry, and they're thinking about that as a career, and so I like that aspect of cannabis, that it's becoming more mainstream. I know that there's negatives on that, but for a kid to be able to pursue his dream in the cannabis industry like I was able to pursue mine, I think is critical. And I think through education and testing and they're unfortunately regulating the market allows some of those things to happen, and there is good and there is bad.
Well, it's tough because when you talk about licensing, you want to make it fair for everybody, but there is no fair standard. Some people have easy access to capital. Some people have impossible to correct histories that would disallow them. Some people don't have connections to business, which would allow them to be able to do some of these things. So having a system that's open to all is a great concept, but creating even openness, that's a challenge. And I think that's what social equity is all about, trying to make sure that people that don't have the same abilities to access the industry as others are given a leg up in order to accomplish that. It's important for us to encourage social equity throughout the entire United States to make sure people that would otherwise be left out of this industry don't have to be.
Help me. You guys are so passionate about this, and obviously I'm passionate about cannabis, or I wouldn't be wouldn't be here. How do you, from the social equity aspect, how does that play out? I'm truly asking a question I don't understand. Like,
Sure.
How are you expecting, like we had, I don't want to mention companies on here, but we had companies in Illinois that tried to help social equity applicants, go for an application. Is that what you mean? Like having a fund to fund social equity clients? I'm just trying to understand what's
social equity incorporates so many different things. There are state level social equity programs. There are local social equity programs. In Michigan, the primary method of social equity assistance has been through the waiving of fees or the reduction of fees, which really isn't a significant amount when you're talking about the total amount of cash that's necessary in order to start a business in this category. So when we talk about adequate social equity, that has to be funding for small businesses, incubators, low to no cost loans. We've got to get the Michigan Land Bank involved in order to free up properties. We've got to get Michigan financial institutions to make the kind of commitments that they make in other disadvantaged situations. So when we talk about social equity, it's a single term that incorporates many different aspects of benefit. So it's really difficult to decide. And in some areas of the state, for example, up north, they have a completely different social equity viewpoint than they do down in southeastern lower Michigan. So
right.
when it comes down to it, you really have to be adaptable. And there is no really one size fits all social equity program.
Don't you think that it makes it kind of difficult, the federal legalization piece? And thinking through, like, when I just heard you say what you said, I think like, okay, now you're asking for federal funding is what you're asking for, basically.
Nope.
Because, well, where else is it going to come from?
We've been doing social equity for 30 different states already, and it's always been funded in state. We don't need to have federal overlords giving us money. We're doing just fine in states. We just need to spend it smarter.
So you're telling me that, okay, again, I'm just trying to understand this. So the state should fund a social equity program that allows, license fees to be waived, and then beyond that, a further fund to be able to finance social equity clients. So that's what you're saying.
I'm sure that's what's already been happening in states across the USA. Right.
Right.
Yep. Because that's when you talk about a state program, you can't expect the federal government to fund a state program. Federal governments typically fund state programs, and we don't really want federal oversight to begin with, not immediately. What we see is there are large cultivators on the West Coast that have a plethora of cannabis. They say Oregon has a 3-year market supply stacked up in their warehouses. So what we don't want is for federal legalization to allow Oregon to dump all of that cannabis on Michigan or Illinois or Ohio or the East Coast, dumping it at less than cost, that may be less quality than what we're seeing right here, and then completely disrupt the markets. I can't imagine what it would be like for a guy like yourself. You have multiple retail outlets plus cultivation. If that were to flood the market, that might be devastating for a guy like you.
Well, it's part of the business. It's product prices are going up and down all over the place as we know. And yeah, I mean, I think, if you did that, it would be good for social equity because, the cost of capital for everyone is so expensive, and so if you had a fund that the state had that could provide capital even at a much lower rate, that might even the playing field.
That's really the goal, right? Yeah.
New York added into the language 40% of the revenue to go towards social equity funding, and that's going to be a lot of money and give it teeth. It took this many states in maybe to figure out that that's a good way of making sure that it can be facilitated and something can actually happen sooner than later. But a lot of companies in Michigan, including NOBO, do a good job of having social equity programs in place and really helping out a lot. We need more. We need that kind of stuff, but it's not like it doesn't happen because of that.
Right. No, again, Illinois was so disappointing. It was such a great opportunity to do right there from the social equity aspect, and we'll see. Hopefully maybe they can pull a rabbit out of a hat, basically.
We were all really hoping, Alan, that Illinois would be that shiny example that we could use to help to craft new state laws after that. But sometimes, wishing it to be just isn't good enough.
Well, it was right before the pandemic, and I was doing we put 17 or 20 licenses in there ourselves, and went pretty heavy and deep, and went and partnered up with everybody we could, that we thought gave us the best opportunity. And these weren't like superficial relationships. These were like, we're in bed with these people full on, and they were great people. And we brought the whole group together. Right. But at the end of the day, it was really about the veteran. It wasn't about the social equity applicant. It was about the veteran and then also big money. So, you can never trust those guys, basically, is the bottom line. But I'm at this show. I'm on a panel, and after the panel, there was a group of people there to speak with me, and they all had put applications in and were trying to finalize them and needed information from us, like lighting plans and things like that. And so I couldn't help everybody, but I helped a few different groups with lighting plans and whatnot. And I feel for those people because I know for a fact that some of them had, some of their last savings in this, in trying to get a social equity license. And here it is, how many months later. And it's kind of sad.
We are willing to spend our last dollar to try and achieve our dreams. Isn't that true? I don't think that's uniquely American. I think that's just a human thing, no matter what culture you go to. In order to achieve something that we've really wanted that badly, we'll do almost anything. And that's why we need to really construct state laws so that they're advantageous for the people that they intend to help, which are the average Joes, not the guys who are already rich and then kind of filtering their way into the industry as just one of many businesses that they have that's contributing to their yacht fund. So,
I don't know a lot of people in cannabis like that, Rick. I'll be honest with you. So
I can introduce you to some here in Michigan.
Yeah, if you know them, I don't necessarily want to know them because that's not me. But I'm just telling you, I don't really know them. That's not what I see, but that's just my perspective.
Yeah. Well, the fact is we have a lot of partners in a lot of trade associations here in the state that are doing wonderful work. Social equity is very loosely defined in Michigan. So when you see people going out of their way to do a good job at it, it's because it's really within their heart, because they're not required to, they're just choosing to. That makes a big difference. Tell us a little bit about your social equity programs here in the state. What have you been doing?
Well, we have a couple different things that we're doing. We have a partnership with Ryan Bazar at Redemption. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Never heard of him.
And then we're really doing just a lot of work in Benton Harbor. And that's really the core of where we're doing our social equity work is in Benton Harbor. We're starting our own nonprofit, really working on the community there, things that are in the future that we're really excited about. Obviously we came into that community. It's been a crazy experience for me, just in the sense that, sometimes when we would be at town hall meetings, there would be a line of people out the door again to meet me and to ask for jobs. And a lot of the community has come up to me on many occasions and basically feels like cannabis is the way to really propel that community forward after, years of being suppressed, and having, residents incarcerated. All that stuff is front and center in Benton Harbor. So for me to bring cannabis to Benton Harbor, it's a whole experience. And so the bulk of the work that we're doing is within our own community, because we're, I know I've been put as a big guy on this, but we're not. We're pretty small. So with that being said, we're trying to affect change in our community, because that's what we feel like is our duty is, for them letting us in the community.
Alan, that sounds like you outlined an idea, but what's the real programs that you're using? What's the real things that you're doing? How can people look forward to seeing NOBO and helping in the community?
Well, there's a lot of things. We're doing fundraiser events. We're doing. We've started a nonprofit there. We work with some local athletes there who have their own nonprofits that we support their nonprofits there in the community. We're having a job fair there because what we've learned is a lot of individuals there don't have the ability to apply online or the ability to put a resume together. So those are some things that we're working on. Really trying to work with the community itself to form partnerships within the community because it's going to be a little crowded there after all of the retail locations are up and running. And so we work with the art district, just a lot of different items.
Cool.
Hey, just to dig in a little bit more, what's that nonprofit about that you mentioned?
Well, we're trying to refurbish the old building in town, and so we're working on refurbishing an old building in town that is really early on. So I can't tell you all the details because it's not fully where it needs to be, but it's something we've been working on for a couple of years. But it's also important to understand, guys, like NOBO's pre-revenue. And so, we've invested in the community about $12 million. So, we're doing all we can, moving forward again, we just got adult use last week. So, and with COVID, we've got a lot of things planned, but we want to do a yearly fundraiser there. That's like a food drive where we have a kind of music and really kind of bring out the cannabis culture, basically. So that's one thing we want to do. Those are a few things that we want to do. One of the things we're trying to do is hire more local people. It's been really difficult with the cannabis industry. There's not a lot of experience in Michigan compared to how many businesses are now operational. So the point is, if you're a good cannabis professional in this space, you are very well, you're needed right now. And so training is important, right? Training people to do the work so that the business can be more efficient.
Hey, couple of questions here before we actually wrap up, and we've had like a pretty cool discussion. It's gone on for a while before and I really appreciate your time, and I'm not sure if you expected to spend this much time, but really appreciate you sticking this out with us. When you're presenting cannabis, is there much? Do you hold much stock in the traditional like high THC, something that's necessarily called sativa or indicas? How do you present cannabis?
It's a good question, Jamie. We've actually, that's always the age-old thing, right? Because we have our main, some of our purchasers or buyers, I should say, in Michigan. And again, we've only been medical, so we're just getting going here. But early on, we're learning that same thing we learned in Colorado. If it's not 20%, they don't want it. It's just the way that it is. But all the growers and everybody else is like, this is BS. It's really about the cannabinoid profile, right? But how do you educate the market? And so how do you fight that fight? So one thing we've been kind of playing around with as of late is, and we haven't done this, but it's to start to test all the cannabinoid profiles. I'm saying the wrong thing. It's the terpenes. We want to test for terpenes, right? And maybe that's the way that we can try to differentiate our 16% bud or whatever it is. But to be honest with you, we've had to steer away from it and make sure that we can grow plants that grow over 20%. So I don't have that issue. And it's kind of BS. We all know it is. Doesn't make it a better high, if you will. But it's the way the market is, unfortunately. But that's what we've seen in Colorado. I can tell you years ago, it was the funniest story. One of the largest Colorado companies, they're like, is your product 20%? Yes, it's 20%. I sell them 20 pounds. The next thing I know, it comes back because it was 19.9. And, literally, this is like 4 or 5 years ago, guys. So
you can't ever be that back anyway, right? It might have been 23.
I mean,
with the margin of error, right? Yeah.
A lot of times you get the numbers back and you're like, hey, can you retest this? And all of a sudden, it's a completely different number. So it's a difficult stuff. There's a lot of, we've all been pioneers in this space, and it's not, there's a lot of bumpy roads, and testing is one of them, as well as the social equity conversation that we got into. It's a loaded thing, but I think we can all rejoice in the fact that we're moving cannabis forward. And if you look at how short of a time in the grand scheme of things, we've taken it from where it was to where we are. I think I'm proud of that as a entrepreneur in this space.
Right on. Hey, is there anything else you want to leave us with before we close up the segment?
Well, if any of the viewers are in Muskegon, and you mentioned that you saw me on this on your show here,
Yes, Cabbage Cafe.
You get a special discount.
That's awesome.
Hey.
And I love being on the show, guys. I love being pressed. It's so much fun. So as you can tell, I will sit here and talk forever about cannabis. And so anytime you guys want to have another conversation, I think we could. There's a lot of stuff we could talk about.
We'll do it again for sure, man. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. And
thank you so much.
Good luck with the opening of the new stores and the new facilities here in Michigan.
I hope to see one of you guys there soon.
Thanks a lot, man.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. So we are joined by Najanava.
Hey guys.
That was a smooth transition, Jamie. I don't know how you pulled that off. That was great.
And I think I said the name correctly too.
You did well. Thank you.
That has not always been the case. As everybody's heard me say a name knows.
Don't let him get confident. You keep him in his place.
But hey, so we have a few things we could talk about, and I really appreciate you joining us here today. You've been involved in a lot of political stuff, civil rights type things. You're in the cannabis caucus with us and in the coalition.
Mm-hmm.
And you've recently become director, and you are the founder of the Clean Smoke Community Investment Project.
Yeah.
Good. So please let us know a little bit more about what you're doing, and then we'll get into that new organization and how and why it came into existence.
So a lot of the work that I'm doing right now is about how we can reduce violence as well as poverty in Detroit. As I'm hoping a lot of people know, Detroit is America's blackest city, and it also happens to be one of the poorest cities of the major cities in the country. So recently we've been doing some work with Force Detroit and around reducing violence. And around the cannabis industry, we started thinking about what are the other components that we need to reduce violence, and any effective strategy in reducing violence that's not also trying to figure out how to reduce poverty has come up ineffective in previous studies. So with the Clean Smoke Community Investment Project, what it is we've taken the marijuana space and what is supposed to be a vibrant, loving space, and just making sure that we're directing some of the revenue that's coming into our city at positive things to rebuild the communities that have been ravished by the war on drugs.
Right on.
What are some of those projects that you're talking about directing funds towards? Revitalizing the city is a great idea. Get us excited about projects.
So we have a 3-tier approach that we are going at the investment. We want to invest in reentry because there are still so many people locked up in Michigan prisons on marijuana-related offenses. And as we're striving towards getting freedom for our brothers and sisters who are still incarcerated, we want to make sure that they have access to funding, to housing, transportation, and things of that nature. So with Michigan Cannabis Freedom Coalition, which both Rick and Jamie are a part of with me, we have been issuing grants to people as they are being released from Michigan prisons. We've been helping them out as they're on the inside or trying to help their families out in whichever way that we can once we're partnering with them on our clemency programs. So we want to make sure that that program has funding and other programs like it. The second option is we want to make sure that people who were overly criminalized before because of marijuana now have an opportunity to get into the industry. So small startup capital, business resources, and things like that, we're trying to help build out for Detroit legacy applicants, as well as people who didn't quite get an opportunity to fill out the legacy application, but we know that they've been in the city because they have arrests in the city or something like that. You know, we're trying to take people who would be considered, you know, would have been considered black market and making sure that they get a legitimate opportunity. That last component is rebuilding the cities. So it's not, what we want to do is we want to make sure that while we're going into these communities, we're asking them what kind of things they want to see to help rebuild their communities. It's parts of Detroit that look like they're war zones. And there are still people who live there. And I'm sure they have ideas on how they would like to see their neighborhoods improve. And we want to help fund those ideas.
Right on. So, and this was kind of born out of need as the direction of the coalition took shape too.
Yes. Yeah. When we were when the coalition was being built, we also had a forum. Force Detroit hosted it. It was called Cannabis, Black Equity, and Decriminalization. And in that forum, we were talking about resources that are available, and we touched on those three topics and how there wasn't like a single resource that we could point to in the state, but everything is all scattered. Instead of it just being like, hey, Detroiters, as you're coming home, you have this access. Hey, if you want to get involved in cannabis and you previously had a conviction, we're a resource. Hey, do you want, when you come home, do you want to help us rebuild your neighborhood? Hey, let's employ them. And so that kind of came out of that. And we got, NCFC has been a great partner in just helping us get it off the floor and everything.
Specifically in Detroit, isn't there part of the ordinance allowing adult use or medical dispensaries in the city where they have to give a certain percentage of revenue back to the local communities, and the actual local community activists get to decide where those dollars go, right?
So so there are two different ways, or there are several different ways to do it. At least 1% of the store's revenue will have to go back to either community. So it can go to like local block clubs, it can go to local nonprofits, or it can go back to the city of Detroit. And then with the city of Detroit funds, we're asking that let the community decide on where those funds go.
Yeah. And I mean, when you're really talking about it, there's nobody that knows better what their community needs than the people that lives within it. And it's always been a problem when people try to dictate how money is to be spent from afar. They have no real world perspective. So empowering people with the paycheck to actually make good happen in their own neighborhood, that's powerful stuff. Is that something that we've seen replicated in other communities across America, or is this really something kind of unique to Detroit?
It's really unique to Detroit. So this is something that we're building from the ground up. It'll be the first model in the state, and we're hoping to adapt it in other cities if it goes smoothly. There is a project that's similar. It's called the Boston Impact Imanji Fund. And theirs is similar, where the community gets to invest in the projects that they want to see spring up in their communities. And so they kind of helped me with like a lot of legal framing and things like that. So, and then we adapted it with like the cannabis codes and things like that.
Well, that's really the goal, to take a good example and then improve upon it. And then your example then will be what other people use for their own models, right?
Absolutely, hopefully.
Yeah, fantastic.
There's a lot that goes into the process of somebody getting out of prison and then trying to get, back into the groove of something functional, out of there.
Yeah.
And seems to be very aware of, a lot of those details, and that's what this is in part paying attention to.
Yeah, we've been working. We've been trying to urge the governor, as you guys have been, so active with as well, to set a criteria for clemency, so that we can get some volunteer lawyers to push through a set of clemency applications. Right now, we have 3 lists. Each of those lists had about 1,200 people on them. We've worked through a whole list of 1,200 people, and we've narrowed it down to about 125 people who are nonviolent and have marijuana-related offenses, active or inactive. And we're hoping to push through like at least those 100. This, in a soon time frame. But it would be so much easier if the governor would just give us a criteria so we can say, hey, when we say nonviolent, is that going to be similar to her definition of nonviolent? Because we didn't want our definition of nonviolent to include crimes of poverty.
Defined as burglary, things of that nature, where there's no violence against people, but the law enforcement community defines them as violent crimes.
Right, exactly.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep. I mean,
and oftentimes that's the first thing taken out. We want to whittle this down, and any violent things are off the table. Right. But meanwhile, those people really do also need a lot of help. They didn't do anything that really warranted.
We also know that the police system that we have in our court system oftentimes make people say that they're guilty of things that technically they may not be guilty of, just so that they can get leniency within sentencing. So oftentimes we're punishing people for things that's really not appropriate. The system is set up to disadvantage people that don't have the financial resources to get competent defense attorneys to represent them. And it's been that way for a very long time. It's tough to play catch up for it, but every single day we have to make a forward motion on trying to fix those things that happened in the past. If we don't, who will?
And so I want to clarify a little bit what you were saying, Ajanava, and that was talking to the governor about trying to get some standards or some parameters in place, meaning like what things will make somebody eligible? What do we all agree on that somebody could get clemency? And then we could identify those people and then start a pipeline. And
exactly.
We've been having a hard time kind of like linking up with the governor's office exactly with creating that efficiency, but it's still being worked on, and there's some promise there. And also, there was a list that we got from the state, which was to identify those who meet certain criteria that was requested about cannabis-related crimes.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you've gone through that list pretty extensively, and there's some confusion as to why some people are on there. There's not cannabis-related stuff. There's very serious, violent type things. Not stuff that was in the confines of the request. And but you have been able to, nonetheless, go through that list and identify people in need of help, and have begun a process of reaching out, and that's part of it too, right? Getting a hold of people there and letting them know that somebody knows that they're in there, and many of these people, that are just very appreciative of that effort. And that's something that the coalition and I think you are doing also.
Right. And we're not, a lot of times you'll have people, they'll reach out for your story, but they can't really do anything to help. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't one of those coalitions. We're trying really hard to make sure that we're able to, if we're reaching out, that we think that they're a good candidate for clemency, which means that we're going to try to put in a clemency application for you. So hopefully you're going to get out soon. If you're up for parole and you need letters of support, and we thought that you would have been a good candidate for the clemency process, we're going to help with, writing letters for you. We just want to make sure that when we're reaching out to people, we're offering them hope, to let them know that, hey, we see that this $1 billion industry is taking off, and we haven't forgotten about you.
One thing that I think is being left out a little bit of this particular story is the number of people that the government sent us. When we asked the government to give us a list of people who were incarcerated for cannabis-related crimes, they did what they sometimes do when they don't like a FOIA request. They gave us a ton of information. What they try to do is they swamp the requester with so much data, there's no way they can reasonably process it in order to find the data that they were really sincerely looking for. So when I look at it, not Geneva, what was that, a couple thousand names that were on that list originally?
Yeah, so we got it down to about 1,200 when they sent us over the final list. But we've gotten 3 different lists from 3 different forms of government, and they each have about 1,200 people. But several of them didn't have like cannabis related offenses at all on there. Some of them were like we had already said, if they have so it was just wild. Some of the things that were on there, we were like, oh, okay.
So when we talk about talking to the governor's office in order to try and get clemency, it makes a lot of sense to us. But what we're seeing is government that is not happy with our requests. We see that we're not making a lot of headway with the governor's office. When we ask for the names, we got a flood of them from 3 different departments. This is a government that really doesn't want to do things differently than they've been doing them for a long time. And what we are doing is trying to force change, and force change faster than they normally like to have it done. So government's not responding as well as we'd like them to. I mean, is that a fair assessment, would you think?
So I can't say that. So we haven't spoken to the governor directly, right? But in the conversations that we have had, what it seems like they're trying to communicate is that they're open to the clemency requests. But I don't know if we've been able to communicate that, hey, if we sent you 1,200 clemency requests, like you sent us this 1,200 names, what that would do to your system. And that's kind of what we're saying is, we appreciate that, you're open to clemency and all of this, but it's hard for us to even get lawyers to sign on to do clemencies without those clear parameters. So it's like it's making the whole process go slower by not giving us the clear directive. So, yeah.
I get you. One thing I'll note too is that when the governor's office says, yeah, we're willing to take those clemency requests, they didn't give up anything. That's the process that already exists. They're basically saying, feel free to flood us with as many of those through our current methodology as you'd like. And what we'd like to do is to have a more streamlined methodology and right. One that can be more targeted so that we don't waste the time of the people like the parole board that has to be involved in those decisions. And at the same time, we're also respecting the human beings that are behind bars for reasons that they shouldn't be.
I think it's pretty reasonable too, based upon how the campaign of the governor, her pledge to help out with things like this.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think she's kind of. She's stated that she believes that she's kind of matched up to, her campaign promises, but the expungement language kind of shortchanged cannabis a little bit. There's a lot of room for improvement there. There's still people in prison. She's been in there for over 2 years. These are things that she discussed that she would help out with. And she low prioritized it, as do many when they get into office. Maybe had some good intentions, maybe really does agree with us on some levels, but does not make this her priority in any way or find it to be as important as other issues. Of course, many other important issues are on the table, defense, but this is something that can be done. It should be done. And here's a great way that's being presented to her to be able to facilitate it. I know the work is ongoing, and it'd be great to get that switch flipped and her get on board,
Absolutely.
And I know you're putting good pressure on it. You're very aware of these issues. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the response that we've been getting is just that the governor's office doesn't work with outside agencies on issues of clemency. And so that it seems as if that policy just needs to be amended a little bit. Even if it can't be a partnership, even setting a clear criteria would help us get the process going. Because right now the system looks like it's working because they're not getting the number of requests in comparison to how many people are in jail, but are in prison. But in fact, the system is failing the way it's intended to succeed, to make it look like it's working, but it's actually failing the people.
Right. Bureaucracy.
Exactly. I can't hear you.
Rick, you're muted. You're saying some important shit, but
every show, one of us does it. That's for sure. Oh, I love StreamYard. I'm just saying that, it's easy to have a small number of clemency requests if you make the process so difficult that the average person can't complete it. And if you make it so difficult that you have to have legal representation all the way through, and Janava, some of these clemency programs, they take months, if not years, once they even begin, right?
Yeah. Yep. Especially without the government working with us, then yes.
Yeah.
It can take years.
That, like, the Michael Thompson, I mean, that was a grand effort. Everybody knows there were national organizations on that, many lawyers, many groups and organizations in Michigan. Kind of seems like the state likes to rest on that. Like, hey, look what we did. This one person and great person to get out, candidates should be out, everything.
Yeah.
But we are saying this should be the first of many. And I think they think this was an accomplishment, which it is,
yeah.
Of course, but that
I think that they felt like, hey, we presented a good case with Michael Thompson, and as soon as we get another one like him, go ahead and send them. And like, come on.
It doesn't have to be so sterling perfect of a case for them to want to rush it through. There are a lot of people that maybe have some, let's just call it murky details of their incarceration, but they've done way too much time. And for something that's really a victimless crime, especially when there's no violence involved.
Yeah.
And
especially when there are people out here making millions of dollars on that same thing today,
Yeah.
And we really do need to fix the expungement language. I know that, and we've mentioned it here on the show. There's a new organization, Glenn, Great Lakes Expungement Network.
Yeah.
We're working on trying to Josie Scoggin, Sons and Daughters, Ryan Basor, Redemption Foundation. Working on trying to get people out who are in need and who have a cannabis related thing. But there's this period of time where there can't be any crimes being committed, for a long period, 5-7 years, depending on what the circumstances are. You have a guy that has a simple possession misdemeanor, and we can't get it off his record because he's got a driving on suspended or something like that, 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And that simple possession misdemeanor, that should be automatic.
Mm-hmm.
The system is set up to say no. The system's set up to say no. And the yeses are few and far between, and I think we need to reverse that, especially at a time now when we're finding that the prison industrial complex is such a drain on society. We need to reduce the number of people, not only for humanitarian reasons and for criminal justice and social justice reasons, but also for financial reasons. Oftentimes, you have to appeal to certain lawmakers based on dollars and cents because you can't cry a story to them and have it mean anything to those people. If it's not fiduciary, then they don't want to listen to it. So let's talk about reducing the number of prisons we have in Michigan to reduce our debt load. That's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I was recently going over like some of those numbers because here in Wayne County, we're still seeing arrests for simple possession or, so we've been working on talking to, we just got a new police chief in Detroit. So he came out to Rouge. We had a peace picnic at Rouge this weekend. And so he came out there and I was telling him like, hey, is there any way that we can, maybe stop arresting people this summer, at least for any possession and anything small. We have so much going on in Detroit. Arresting people for weed just can't be the priority. And, so I've been saying that to whomever will listen here in Detroit and in Wayne County. And so I'm hoping that with the new police chief, we'll actually get to sit down and talk about some of the ways that we can move past this and make our city more progressive. It's no reason for our city to be policed the way that it is still for marijuana.
That's right.
And that was unfortunate. There's a couple of cases that I know of. One was fortunately dismissed.
Right.
And that was a guy that was looking at several years. He has previous criminal history and it gets into some, I think maybe weapons and some other drugs and stuff like that. And was selling a small amount of cannabis to somebody else. And of course, transfer without remuneration from 21-year-old plus to 21-year-old plus is okay. With remuneration, it's not exactly clear what the order of things are supposed to be in the MRTMA. And the prosecutor, Kim Worthy, chose to look at it like, well, if you sell it, then you lose all your protections, and then we go to the criminal code. Now you're a felon. So the MRTMA wasn't implemented. It's supposed to be looked at through those eyes first, as of December 6, 2018, and those previous issues ought not have come into play. But that guy was looking at several years in felonies. Now that got dismissed. There's another guy who has several felony firearm charges that stems from an initial cannabis issue, with it not being properly looked at through the lens of the MRTMA. Again, we are working on trying to deschedule with some lawmakers, and one of those types of cases are fertile ground for challenging the scheduling and how it goes to the criminal code like that. And that in one way or another, it's got to come off.
Yeah, we had I had a case that I looked at with a gentleman who ended up being arrested and having a court date for what would have amounted to a $40 sale of weed. And so we reached out to the prosecutor's office about it, and her response was that we haven't prosecuted for petty possession or distribution in almost 5 years in Wayne County. And I was like, wow, that's interesting, because people are still being arrested for it. So if that's kind of a policy, is there any way to announce it?
Let the police know.
Yeah, so that was pretty much my question there too. So hopefully there'll be an announcement or something. We're going to keep bringing it up every time I'm in a room with anybody from the prosecutor's office. I'm just going to keep bringing it up. Like, hey, can we make that announcement? Do our policemen know? Friendly nudge there. Let's not add to that list that we are already going through. Like, wouldn't that be terrible? I'm going through a list of over 1,200 people, and now people are still being added.
Yep. And I'm from Flint, and I can tell you that there have been times when police officers are very thin, and when they're doing things like chasing victimless crimes, like writing tickets or hauling people down for cannabis, it means they're not stopping more serious crime that's taking place someplace else. We talk about redirecting police forces. We talk about defunding the police. One of the things is using our law enforcement officials in a smarter way. And one of the ways to get smarter is to ignore some of the stuff that really should be. Plus, law enforcement has a real problem with public image when it comes to the citizenry. I know I certainly, I pucker up every time a cop passes behind me or I see one in the other lane. I have PTSD, just like other people.
You're not talking about your mouth.
You can interpret any way you wish. Okay. Sorry, Najanava. That's just the way we are. Sorry about that. But the fact is, we need to give some pretty clear direction and say, look, this is something that we don't want to do. Detroit, you said, is the blackest large city in the United States of America. What better place to start smart policing than a place with such a bad reputation for being over-policed? And the number of people stopped for cracked windshield or one tail light out, and then that one individual stop turns into a big felony situation, that's got to end. That's ridiculous.
So that's interesting, right? Because those are two different things when I hear it combined for me. So in Detroit, what we're really pushing for is funding for community policing. We have violence interrupters such as New Era Detroit, the People's Action, Ceasefire. We have different movements that are going on that have been doing violence interruption work that, if funded, we could see the models that other cities have build out, so we're able to reduce violence on our own. But that shouldn't look like between me deciding between, am I going to go to work or am I going to stop these two guys from shooting each other, right? So we've had people in our communities having to make those decisions of, can I save my community or am I saving my family? So we've been asking for funding for community policing. Now in Detroit, we rarely get stopped for cracked windshields, and it goes further. But as soon as we leave Detroit and ride on past 8 Mile or Michigan Avenue or Ford Road, now that's when we're getting stopped, when we're entering into the city like Livonia or the Dearborn or, and then we'll see that cracked windshield and everything else. Like, oh, and you didn't signal everything, right?
Lane violation, they always like to say. Yeah.
Right.
Hopefully they'll pull you over and then notices there's a cracked windshield and go, okay, that's an easy one there. I don't have to make anything up that's too extravagant. I pulled you over for a cracked windshield. You oftentimes can't even see that when you're driving by.
Absolutely can't.
That's an example of over policing. And what we're talking about here is sending a message to law enforcement to just do things in a more community friendly way. And perhaps maybe law enforcement's not always the best person to respond to some situations. We've seen some communities begin to employ social workers to be dispatched to handle domestic situations where someone with a gun walking into your kitchen is probably not the best way to resolve that conflict.
Right.
Yeah. And so. What a great conversation we've had. Violence interrupters. The fact is that it's not a new phrase to me, but could you expand on that a little bit, please?
So we have groups literally so last year during the protests, there were people standing between the police and some of our protests to keep those interactions more peaceful. So in Detroit, though we had several injuries, and it wasn't as bad as other cities because we had the Ray Winans and the Tafari Brents who were standing between those contentious crowds and just saying, hey, we all here together. Let's make sure everybody gets home, kind of thing. So we call them violence interrupters.
Fantastic. What a great role. And that's Pastor Winans, is that correct?
No, Ray Winans is, he's a brother who works in the red zone of Detroit, and he works with people who are likely shooters or likely victims of gun violence.
Outstanding. Everywhere you look, there's a great story, if only you look in the right places. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We live in fantastic times.
So how much work has the new organization done? Are there individuals that have benefited or are poised to benefit?
So right now we're working with 2 gentlemen who have previous convictions. We've already connected them with some of our partners. Actually, they've both partnered with NAACP, who is doing expungements for them. We help them with their social equity application with the state of Michigan. And if you have like previous offenses, then you get a discount with the state of Michigan on recreational licensing. We're going to also help them with their licensing and things with the city of Detroit and the state. So we have 2 individuals that we're working with, and we have 4 communities that we're going to be in this summer to figure out what kind of projects we can do. This summer we'll be offering to like paint your block in Detroit, or like a community garden or something cool. We'll have something where we budgeted an allotment of money for each of the 4 communities that we've been able to work in, and we'll do something cool for each of those neighborhoods if they sign up to do it. So.
Nice.
Is that the Detroit NAACP that you refer to?
Yes.
So traditionally, like national NAACP, Lansing NAACP has been pretty cool about cannabis reform, but the Detroit chapter typically has not been.
So I'm not saying that they're pro marijuana. They are pro expungement. They are pro freedom.
Right. Which is why you think that they would.
I don't want to intertwine the two.
There's a direct relationship.
They know that my people have marijuana convictions. They're going to be doing anything that's under that clean slate.
Right, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's an obvious connection between unnecessary targeting via small cannabis activity and the dockets of the courts being filled up for a long time in Detroit over that stuff, and like serious crimes coming down from it. And so to like not want that to be kind of in the mix, you would think would make sense to them, but that's been a difficult one to present. But it is great that they understand, like, everything else, let's say.
Yeah. I think we kind of have to let people rest on their laurels a little bit, part of the whole freedom thing. They've been pretty strong on, and there are communities in Detroit, right, that do not want to see marijuana businesses, right? And these are communities that have already been thriving, and they have somewhat of an older population, a more religious population, and some of them don't want to see cannabis in their communities. And so we kind of have to like respect that a little bit too. But we are saying that please don't arrest the brother riding through your hood who may have, So as long as we have that comfortable boundary, I'm okay with you. If you don't want weed smoke in your face, I'm not about to blow it.
Yeah.
You cannot want to have the businesses and the and the storefronts right in your own neighborhood, but still not want to see people have their lives turned upside down over a little bit of cannabis either.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So I feel like that's the stance that the NAACP has taken, especially Camilla. She's great. I've known her for years, and we don't agree all of the time, but we always agree on our people deserve freedom. So,
well, this is progress actually, because there was a time it didn't matter how much in alignment your views were. If you supported cannabis, people would absolutely be hands off. Now, if your views are in alignment, they don't mind linking up together, even if you do support cannabis. So they don't have to necessarily be 100% for cannabis, as long as they're for that progress, that linking of people who have like minds and different resources to be able to get together and make things happen locally. Because most change that's meaningful happens on a local level.
Yeah, and Najnav, I've noticed being in the same groups and organizations and the development of this new, and how we've discussed what's going on with the list, and even what you just said about the NAACP. You do a really good job of organizing these things, of taking out what you can as efficiently and as functionally as possible, and worrying about bitching at people later on. And I told you, you promised that we were going to get to bitch at the attorney general for giving us a shitty list at some point, but that you want to get people out as soon as possible. And I really respect that. Your approach is very good.
Yeah, I feel like we can disagree later. Let's get the work done. And that's like a huge issue in our community as well. Like when we're merging over, so for people who are joining like more political spaces that are ruled by like Robert's Rules of Order and things like that, when we come into the spaces and it's like, hey, we're in this space and we know that this is a space where things can change, right? That can be powerful, but then we'll spend so much time on arguing about like little minute details that may not be as powerful, and then we never get to that powerful thing because of those differences. So just being able to like push through with you guys often, even if we don't agree, we still are able to push through it. Like those are the type of relationships that last. Like we should be able to take that criticism on the chin and keep going. Like, let's keep working. We got stuff to do.
Well, right on. Commendable. Not everybody does that, by the way. So.
You were looking at me when you said that. I know that. I could see it on the screen. Yes. All right. All right. I saw you do it.
Colin, who won't keep his mouth shut this entire show.
He's a burden, that Colin is. Yeah.
So I got really stoned and I get quiet sometimes.
That's fine.
He's absorbing a lot of good info.
No, the reality is what we have right now in Michigan is a wonderful situation where there are a lot of people trying to do very, very good things, and people who've always had it in their heart to do good, but were sort of stopped from doing that because of the illegality of cannabis. Now their good intentions are allowed to come forth and to be able to do things. the best thing we can do as leaders and organizers is to provide a platform for other people to be able to join into, so that we can get as many people involved in this revolution as possible. The more people that are aware of the evils of the drug war and how badly it damaged our society, the more quickly we are able to correct that.
Absolutely.
Let's embrace that for a moment.
Thanks, Astro Charlie.
I feel like that was a good space for a commercial break, but that's
No, thank you again. Najanav, it's been wonderful having you on. How can people get a hold of you, or how can they reach out to the different organizations that you're speaking on behalf of?
So cleansmoke.org is the website. Right now it just has the landing page, but you can also, it has a messaging box. Anyone can get in touch with us through that. My email is najanava at cleansmoke.org. Also, forcedetroit.org is our partner organization, and Live Free Detroit and all of our other orgs are under Force Detroit's page.
Fantastic.
Oh, and Michigan Cannabis Freedom Coalition.
Were there any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners and our viewers with today?
I just would like to say, as we continue to push forward, we just want to make sure that this is equitable as possible, that this industry, that this freedom, that these opportunities are as equitable as possible. So as much hope as we can see in it, we need to make sure that that hope is spread out.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And of course, the people that know best what they need in order to succeed are the people, not the officials, not the lawmakers. Thank you very much for being on Jazz Cabbage Cafe today. It was wonderful.
Peace, guys.
Thank you very much. We'll definitely talk soon again. And she had a smooth exit. We had a smooth transition coming into that.
That's awesome. What a great guest. Two really good guests today. That was it was fantastic. Alan, what a trooper. I was kind of,
Hey, you come on the show and say that. That's nobody got mean about it, but you got to say it. And
Yeah.
I appreciated your directness about it, and saw it coming as the words were coming out of his mouth. And it was handled well, and he stuck into the conversation. And
I'm excited about some of the things he described NOBO doing in Muskegon. We've seen Jerry Millen from the greenhouse be very involved in saving a home that was part of the train, the Freedom Train from the south to the north for the slaves, and the Underground Railroad. And it sounds like they have a similar project going in Muskegon. That's exciting stuff. And when we do things like that, it's good for the industry as a whole, good for the cannabis reputation in those communities.
it'd be good to check back in Benton Harbor and talk to them about felons that they hired, the locals that they've helped out, their community outreach projects. I mean, that's a place that could use some stuff, and it'd be nice to see some progress and some work there. I mean, I think you kind of pointed it out. Yeah, this all sounds good, like everybody, great plan, but what's going on in action?
Well, there are a lot of times we ask questions, and it's possible that the person doesn't have the answer because they're at the top of the corporate level, and we're asking them a question that would be, for somebody who's at the store management level to be more proper to answer. But I just
the nonprofit thing, wasn't that clear either, stuff like that. So he was on the spot a little bit, and we kind of pushed that, but he recognized that and said he'll take it on. He'll take that challenge on a little bit.
Look at Jim is on safari. Jim joining us from the wilds of Africa, it seems. How are you,
From
sir?
afar.
I'm doing.
Where are you?
How are you guys doing? Sorry, I missed most of the show. Please tell me everything that's happened. Just repeat everything again.
Well, actually, Najanava was fantastic. You're familiar with Najanava. We just completed an interview with her. She talked about so many things that her different organizations are doing in Detroit, and unique ways that Detroit is trying to lead the way, and not just in the cannabis industry, but policing communities as well. It's very good.
Beautiful.
And then we had Alan from NOBO on earlier, and I was kind of a hard ass with him a little bit because he sort of said some things that kind of stuck under me. But he was fantastic. They work with Redemption Cannabis, Benton Harbor, Muskegon. So he's a pretty solid guy. We're going to have him on again.
They have Real Leaf Solution products on their shelves too, which we appreciate as well.
Tom and Christabella were watching. At some point, they might still be watching, but those are some busy people.
That's great. Yeah, Real Leaf does a great job.
They do. Yes.
Where are you? What's going on, Jim? You're speaking, but no words are coming out.
I'm hearing them.
Can you hear me? Okay.
I am. Yeah.
I was saying that, did you hear the federal government is introducing a bill to decriminalize all drugs on a federal level?
Yes.
You guys spoken about that then already?
We
today?
We
have
have not
not.
spoken about it, but did hear about it before. Thank you for bringing it up now. It is a very cool thing.
It's awesome.
Got to get started somewhere. Obviously, it's not going to go anywhere right at the moment, but that idea is now out in the air, and that's really cool.
It's a great one to get out there for sure.
We know that it oftentimes takes 2 or 3 times before a concept becomes law, and that means a bill has to be introduced 1, 2, or 3 times before it actually gets passed. So this may be the first effort, but it's one of those necessary steps you have to climb when you get to the top of the ladder.
And Schumer has reintroduced the MORE Act. I don't know if it's in the exact same state it was as when it passed Congress in the last session, or if it's been changed at all, but that's been reintroduced. Which
There's
scheduling.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
There's some craziness about budget reconciliations. In order to get around the deadlock in the Senate, what we've done in the past historically has been slide marijuana issues into budget bills and budget reconciliations, and those things take place in the absence of filibuster. And they asked for additional budget reconciliations this year, and the parliamentarian gave them 1, not the 3 that they were expecting. So it's less likely that we'll get what we want through the Senate. However, we're still hopeful.
Yeah. And again, it's out there. It's getting traction, and it'll eventually, it's headed that way.
I honestly believe that there are Republicans out there that will support it if their party allows them to. There are people that philosophically believe in the free market. They recognize that this is a commodity that is here to stay. Hemp and cannabis both. But party politics oftentimes takes the place of sensible reason. That's sad. That's how we are. So still never heard where you're at, Jim.
Yeah, where are you at?
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the heart of Silver Lake, California. It's just east of Hollywood, basically. And I'm kind of in a little sanctuary here on the side of the hill. It's called the Silver Lake Steps, I think, and it's a long stairway that climbs down. You get a great viewpoint from where you are. You can see behind me.
I can.
All
Fantastic.
Right. So it's
Nice.
a better view there.
Jim, have you come across Heidi Johnson yet?
I haven't come across Heidi. I don't know that she still lives down here. I think she might be up north a little bit.
Okay.
But I'm not, she could be.
Jim and I have a mutual friend, daughter of Monica Johnson, who has written a few movies, some hit movies, and worked with Albert Brooks a lot. And I went to boarding school with her in Florida, and Jim was roommates with her in California when he was out there doing some work.
Yeah, just out of the blue, like small world stuff.
Yeah.
It's fun. Yeah, great lady, Heidi.
No.
Well, quite cool, man.
Yeah.
When
I'm glad you
first
made it
came
on the show here.
Yeah. I saw you were kneeling down, crouching with the hillside behind you, and I had flashes of, trying to hide from police helicopters and crouching in ravines, trying to get under an overhang so that no one could tell you were there. But no, it's much less exciting than that, isn't it? Oh, that's sad.
It's about 94 degrees here. Yeah.
How's the humidity?
Crazy. Well, there's no humidity. It's just really dry, so that's why I'm not like perspiring as much. And plus, I'm
That's
tough.
not too bad.
I don't
94
sweat when
dry.
it's hot. Yeah.
Who's on your hat? What's that logo?
That's the logo of Decriminalize Nature, the national organization's logo. You can get this at their website, decrimnature.org. You got a little crow up top. So, yeah.
You guys just had another good show, right?
Yep.
The MTO show?
We did. Yeah, we had a great show last show. Yep, we had a city commissioner from from Grand Rapids on, and that was phenomenal. Talking to him for a while. Who was our first guest?
So we had Barry and Melissa from
Barry and Melissa, yeah.
From Southwest Michigan Psychedelic Network.
Yes, nice.
So, yeah.
And those guys are so passionate about what they do, and just sweet advocates and activists, and practitioners.
One thing I've noticed for sure that there's some parallels, of course, this movement kind of coming in after, a few years of cannabis and that kind of stuff. One thing that's a little bit different, these different groups and organizations and stuff like that pop up, get accepted under the umbrella, get brought into the family. There's not a lot of like rivalry or competition or things like that, and we've had our share of that in the cannabis experience and movement leading up to where we are all over the place. And in fact, some groups and organizations were formed because they split off of other ones and wanted to do things in different ways, like, the People's Front of Judea, the Judea's People's Front, and all that kind of stuff. But in this world, man, there's a lot more working together sooner, it seems like.
In some ways, yeah. But unfortunately, like recently we've had a conflict and Colin can talk about this a little bit too, but the issue with peyote being on these decrim bills surfacing around the country, and people who are, from the native side that are tribal, that have their own way of worshiping and working with peyote, really don't want that to happen. And there's a lot of conflict actually and that's something that we didn't see with cannabis. So it's just a different fight a little bit. It's almost like we're getting more fighting from the Native Americans than we are from the government, which is really an interesting twist.
Yeah, it can get complex in that way, I guess. It's a good point.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that there's just like, I don't know. There is like some conflict, like here and there, like Jim was saying.
These are groups of humans interacting, so I mean, I didn't mean to take a few mushrooms and everything.
There is like also like that big money aspect, like even bigger than like the MCMA.
Some buzzers waiting to come in, right?
So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it true that there are some of the hallucinogenic substances that are actually easier to get approval for to conduct human trials than cannabis has been? Would that be true to say?
Oh, definitely it is. I mean, New York, I think New York University is working with a Canadian company, and I forget which one. It might be like MindMed or Compass or one of those psychedelic companies, and they're setting up I think a research center there.
And a couple things are on the stock exchange. Did you just say that?
Oh, yeah.
MindMed and Compass Pathways, I think is what it's called.
So
those are like those two big.
Are going to home in. I think some of the parallels now. Obviously, you can't have real legalization or can't bring this into the commercial world without establishing that people can, throw down a few spores themselves if they'd like to or whatever.
I think the immediacy of dosaging and in the medicinal side of the psychedelics compared to cannabis. I mean, cannabis can be, of course, but like mushrooms and ayahuasca and things like that, I think they have more. They just have more power, I believe, for people who are suffering from addiction and trauma. And cannabis is very medicinal in so many ways, but it's also very recreational. And granted, psychedelics are recreational, but a lot of people are finding out that they're really helping them when they try them.
So there's an urgency because of the profound stuff they can do, even you go further in some instances on some issues than cannabis could do. And it's very necessary to get that into the fold and accessible to people who need it sooner than later.
Yeah, and I think that's why we see it moving so fast. And we see it moving so fast because of the opioid epidemic too. And there's really no place to turn but this now. And this is where we should have long ago. We tried it our way. Now we're going to try it Earth's way.
Yeah. Well, that's a human thing. I mean, no other species denies access to something for superficial or for political reasons. It's just something wicked that we do to each other as Homo sapiens. So, and again, we talk about the endocannabinoid system. This is a system that our bodies that have craved cannabinoids for a long, long time and have been denied them. And, over 100 years, have we changed the character of who humans are? Maybe not, but we might have created a much more mean society. We're not in homeostasis. We're not where we need to be. And when we reintroduce psychedelics, then people who sincerely don't know who they are or sincerely don't know where they fit might be able to find some of the answers to the questions they have. It's important.
I agree.
But, hey, before we go, I just want to show this again. And I did put this up before, but I'll put it up again. No way of verifying any of this, but pretty fucking funny if true.
Yeah, it's
It says, super tech friend, 0% chance of hack on the MCMA site. It's traced to the image, trace the image to the designer of the site. They put it up on purpose.
Are you?
Now we have no way of verifying that. Don't know for sure what the deal is. Wouldn't assume that to be the case at all. In fact, I said that earlier. But if true, that is pretty fucking funny.
So just so our listeners who are not video capable are aware of what we're doing, we're displaying an image that was shown on the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association website. This is a screenshot someone pulled from their telephone. You can still see that it's in phone format. And the photo that shows a male cannabis plant, which we know never used in our industry. It also shows spider mites, which we kind of don't like in this industry, and some pretty ugly looking cannabis. So the fact that someone who doesn't know anything about cannabis would look at this and think, wow, that's kind of a neat weed picture, I might buy that. But man, this really seems like it's such a poor example of cannabis that it seems like a setup to me. It really does.
Well, maybe they have a sense of humor and they're just like, here's what these people think we grow anyway. So
No, I don't think the MCMA has a sense. Look at Steve Linder. Steve Linder seemed like he has a sense of humor.
Wow.
they're probably slapping their knee right now, just having a good time with this whole thing.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, they're not deterred. So I mean, we're going to go here pretty soon, but they are still showing up in meetings and saying, like, we want to get rid of the caregiver system and believing it's going to benefit them. And it's still going on. Gotten some good reaction. Obviously, Medical Mondays, Berg and Roach, the memes, and getting the guests on their show and keeping up some momentum in that regard. I mean, that has gone on and that's real, but they're not stopping.
They being the MCMA, they are not stopping trying to advocate for changes to the caregiver rules that would financially benefit them, they believe, but would really disadvantage sick people and the people who love them and care for them. And we can't allow that to happen in Michigan. This is who we are.
I think there's room and enough support to really have a serious ramped up boycott and win it if necessary, if this language starts getting traction. The other thing is, before we go, summer session for the lawmakers is about ready to kick in. Quite often, the state senators and the representatives hold like coffee hours and hang out in their own districts where they live and meet up with constituents. The MCMA is going to be courting these people all summer, ready to push this agenda in the fall. As many of us, groups, organizations, individuals, that go to talk to them and express our side of the coin. Don't change the caregivers. Leave them alone. Don't try to hurt the small businesses. Just go compete. Leave that stuff alone. I think would be very helpful. So I just want to remind it. Colin, any final thoughts, man? You've been absorbing a lot today.
Also, just to piggyback what you were saying, is talk with your state representatives and state senators about the decrim bill that Jeff Irwin is introducing into the state Senate shortly. So, especially
if your representative is on the Republican side.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, I think that's really important.
Rick, wrap it up for us, man, if you don't mind.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say nobody told me about the special Am I Legalized T-shirt day that we were supposed to have today. You see, Jamie and Colin got it. I mean, I'm not on the message board, apparently. Nobody wants to talk to me. So
not quite as bad as a few years ago when we had an Am I Legalized meeting out at the mansion at Daryl's place, but
Plantation, yes. Yeah, and Jim Powers and I showed up in exactly the same outfit. That's true, yes. And you still harp on that years and years later, even though it didn't happen to you. So that's just kind of crazy. But in reality, though, we had a great show with good guests. What we're really seeing is that cannabis is an evolving space. The things that are going on are so multifaceted. It's like Game of Thrones. We have interesting things happening in Detroit, interesting happening in Lansing, Southwest Michigan. The Kalkushka Lounge up north. There are so many different stories you can talk about. There's a wealth of information, but remember that you have to trust the source, because if you're getting information and it's not from a trustworthy source, you learn it wrong, and then it's tough to fix later. So keep sticking with Jazz Cabbage Cafe. We'll do our very best to bring you authoritative guests who can tell you exactly how it is with no filter and no bullshit. There you go.
Right on. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Take care, Jim.
Cafe. See you guys.
Thanks, Joe.